Hello, 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 and welcome back to another college football video, man. If you're looking for the most professional, most up-to-date, most informative college football content on the internet, stop right here. Look, search no further. You've arrived at the Raad YouTube channel. Rivalry week just took place, and I'm here to recap every team. The regular season is over. We have conference championship weekend coming up here, and then the college football playoff and bowl games. So great regular season, absolutely spectacular. Parity is a beautiful thing. So let's get right into it, y'all. But first, thank you for watching. Pull up the trusty Google Slides right here. All right, let's get it started. So Oregon, the only undefeated team this regular season, they finish it off by a lot of people overlook this game, but as some of you don't know, this was a very monumental and significant win for Dan Lanning and the Oregon program. Under Dan Lanning, Oregon was 0-3 against Washington, against Kalen DeBoer, against Michael Penix. Bo Nix, as great of a quarterback he was, I think Bo Nix only lost 3 or 4 games at Oregon. And I know for a fact 3 of them were against Washington. So credit to Oregon. They got over that hump. A lot of people didn't think about this. Oregon's won a lot of games the last few years, but this is the first time under Dan Lanning that they beat Washington. And I know Dylan Gabriel has not been as good as Bo Nix was the last 2 years, but hey, he did something that Bo Nix was not able to do. He did beat the Washington Huskies. They ran the ball very well. I mean, they scored 7 touchdowns. I mean, what else can you ask for? Jordan James, he's been a breakout stud this year. He had a very good game defensively. You are reading that correctly. It says that they had 10 sacks. 10 sacks against Washington. 43 rushing yards allowed, a dominant performance, did not slip up. And Oregon, really, if you think about it, their biggest struggles this season were the first 2 weeks of the season against Idaho and Boise State. They just kept getting better and better and better in conference play. Because think about that. Two of your out of conference games, first 2 weeks, they played a brutal games back to back to back to back, and they didn't slip up. All these other teams in the country had a slip up, had a whoopsie type game, not Oregon. And that's why the number one team in the country. And I think they are going to eviscerate Penn State, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Georgia at number two. Did I already talk about this game? I made a whole video talking about this game, so I'm not going to go too in depth. Possibly, however, the craziest college football game I've ever seen in my life. 8 overtimes versus Georgia Tech. That's what it took for Georgia to beat them at home. A ridiculous game. Carson Beck, by the way, his last 3 games in a row now, Carson Beck is looking like the old Carson Beck. So I'm not here to put any, undue pressure on him, but it looks like those midseason demons he was fighting are now past him. At least that's what it would appear to be. They didn't run the ball all too well. No player really had a standout performance. It was just they got rolling in the second half and they did not stop. Defensively, however, giving up 563 yards to Georgia Tech and about 480 yards to Haynes King. That's not a very good look. So I don't know how Georgia does it. I don't know how they show up and dominate teams like Texas and Tennessee, but then in the same breath struggle against teams like UMass and Georgia Tech. I do not understand it for the life of me, but it's just, all in the life of a Georgia fan. So they finished the regular season 10-2, much worse than I even thought was possible. I actually predicted them to go undefeated this season, a massive blunder on my part. But I also think I did predict Oregon to go 12-0. That's besides the point. I think I'm gonna try and remember what I predicted all these teams to go. Georgia 10-2. I think, well, I know that they are going to play Texas in the SEC championship game. They are in the playoffs regardless. I think, compared to my rankings, they're like 7 or something right now. If they beat Texas, they'll get a first round bye, be one of the first 4 teams. If they lose to Texas, they'll still be in. Probably have to play a road playoff game if I had to guess, but that's to be determined. We'll see what happens there. Georgia controls their own destiny on how the playoffs go from here on. Notre Dame, I have at number three. I talked about it a lot this season. After the loss to NIU, keep in mind, Notre Dame was a team I held in the same respect as like Penn State. If you know this channel, you know how much I hate Penn State. I was really starting to hate Notre Dame because of how disappointing they were consistently. And after they lost the game to NIU, I'm like, oh man, it's over. This is ridiculous. I've completely given up on Notre Dame. But 10 games after that, they go 10-0. Their offense really turns it up by being a dominant running team. Their defense plays outstanding. And now they end up all the way higher than they've ever been for me on the Rod poll. Number three, I have Notre Dame right now. And listen, with that being said, by the way, I messed this thing up. They did not beat Army 49-35. They beat USC 49-35, which is terrible for them because that is their worst defensive performance of the season. I don't think anybody had scored more than like 24 against Notre Dame all year. And then their final game of the year in the Coliseum, they got 35 to USC. That is very concerning to me. 557 yards allowed because the whole thing with Notre Dame for me, and you got to understand what this ranking is who I think would win on a neutral field in a playoff type atmosphere. I have Notre Dame at three. I was going to put them above Georgia, actually, but because I saw how terrible their defense performed in this game, that makes me concerned that, well, if you can't stop USC, are you going to be able to stop a team like Georgia, like Tennessee, Texas, Ohio State? That's to be determined. But their offense seems to have flipped that switch. They have two great running backs, Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love, both played amazing this game. The Riley Leonard, the quarterback, has found his play style that works for him and works for this offense. And defensively, as long as they're not giving up 30 plus, they have a great chance because they will be hosting. They will have a home playoff game. They are not in the conference, obviously. They avoid the conference championship weekend. So they will host a playoff game. The question is who will it be against? I think they have a really good chance against pretty much any team besides Georgia. Number four, I have Texas. They beat A&M in a very disappointing game. I'm glad I didn't watch this game. I could tell this game was getting hyped way out of proportion. Okay. I have just never really been that interested in like watching Texas. Talking about them is fine, but like watching them is just not for me really. And then A&M, I mean, they just who wants to I mean, this game was getting hyped so much like who's really gonna watch this? And apparently it did not live up to the hype whatsoever. It was a very bad game, but Texas pulls it out. I don't think A&M scored a single point actually, now that I think about it, because I think their only score was on a pick six. So their offense, Texas A&M's offense, did not even score a single point. So credit, I'll say this Texas defense has been outstanding. The Texas defense gets an A plus from me this season. Same as the Ole Miss defense. Who would have thought that Ole Miss's defense would be better than their offense, really, in the sense? And then Texas, their offense is not able to compete and catch up with this defense. I mean, so many amazing performances, even in the Georgia game, picking off Carson Beck three times. But it was like the Texas offense that let them down in that one. And I think honestly, that's going to be the same result in the SEC championship game. I don't think Texas is going to beat Georgia. I think they're going to end up losing that game, going 11-2, and we'll see. I think they'll probably still host a playoff game if they lose. That's my prediction. I think at 11-2, they still are in that top spot where they host a playoff game. But talking about this game specifically, Quinn Ewers played the majority. He's just, it's unfortunate for him, right? Because he's getting pushed out the door. Arch Manning is going to start next year, so he either has to go to the NFL and not be a first round pick, or I guess he could transfer somewhere else if he doesn't think he'll be a top draft pick. But it's kind of unfortunate because he is a young player and he really doesn't. He's dealt with a lot of injuries, but he's just not that good. I just Quinn Ewers, I've never believed in him. I've always wanted to see more, and I've never gotten that. It's a weird thing, but they ran the ball incredibly well against Texas A&M. Quintravion Weisner, he is not doing himself any favors with that first name, but he had 35 touches in this game, 207 yards. That's damn near as many yards as A&M had as an entire team. So shout out to him. Obviously, the defense played well. It's funny. Texas has low key turned into Tennessee, where you're not so sure about the quarterback play, but the defense is outstanding and the run game is really, really good. It's funny how that happened overnight, really. But I mean, that's what you got with Texas right there, and they are my number four team right now. Now we got to talk about Ohio State. What a terrible loss! One of the most shocking, unexpected. Let me break down. So Ohio State lost to Michigan in Columbus, right? I'm going to break down all the reasons why Ohio State should have blown out Michigan this particular season. Not the previous three seasons. This particular season, Ohio State had at least twice as much talent, possibly even three times as much talent on this roster Michigan has. Ohio State had five or six players who could have been drafted last year in the first two rounds return to their team this season. They brought in Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs from the transfer portal. This game, like I said, was in Columbus. Michigan was missing their two best players on the entire team, arguably, certainly two of their best three players, Colston Loveland and Will Johnson. A team already way less talented than Ohio State was missing their best offensive player and their best DB, both of which will be first round picks. And then in the game itself, Michigan passed for 62 yards and threw two picks. Given all of those factors, Ohio State should have won this game by 40 points. They lost. Ohio State at home with the more talented roster against a banged up Michigan team who is not even close to as talented put up 10 points. Honestly, Ohio State was Penn State maxing a little bit here. I was getting big Penn State vibes watching this Ohio State offense last weekend. Will Howard, is that a Drew Aller stat line? It looks like it. 185 yards, one touchdown, and two terrible picks. Terrible. Is it fair? I know it is fair to say he performed worse than Kyle McCord did in Ann Arbor last year. Who would have thought that Ohio State back-to-back years just with terrible QB play when it mattered the most? Because keep in mind, guys, he made two big mistakes against Penn State as well. We overlook that. We don't talk about that. But in their two biggest games, in the Oregon game, listen, he played well in the Oregon game, but he lost the game with a boneheaded decision. So in every single big game Ohio State's played this year, Penn State, Michigan, and Oregon, Indiana does not count. Will Howard has made key mistakes in all those games. It is what it is. They could not run the ball. It does. They have the best backfield in the country with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. Both of those guys will be first or second round picks, regardless of what Ohio State does. They're going to go in the NFL and be successful. It does not matter how good their backfield is. Ohio State is soft. That's a fact. And especially the play calling. I've talked about play calling. Chip Kelly is the play caller for Ohio State this year. He left a head coaching job to come call plays for Ohio State and call 20 runs right up the middle into the best position group on Michigan's entire team. It is the most boneheaded, retarded shit I've ever seen. You have two great running backs, two amazing, shifty running backs. You have a weak interior, a banged up, injured interior of your offensive line. And you decide to run it right up the middle into two first-round defensive tackles of Michigan? Terrible. Terrible play calling. And Ryan Day's responsible. He let this happen. Their top five players, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and Emeka Egbuka, got 39 touches for 236 yards and one touchdown. We know this. They are a five-man offense. That is their entire team. Compared to last week against Indiana, the numbers are down across the board. They did not throw the ball enough. But honestly, I'm not even sure I can blame them because when they did, Will Howard was throwing ridiculous picks. They had nothing going on offense with all that talent against a banged up defense. They could not move the ball at home. Embarrassing. An indictment, a fireable offense for Ryan Day and Chip Kelly. Defensively, what can you say? Jim Knowles has changed this Ohio State defense over the last couple of years. They've looked absolutely incredible this season, and that's shown through. They gave up 0 points against Penn State on the road and at home against Michigan. 2 takeaways, 62 passing yards allowed, only 13 points. And by the way, both of those Ohio State turnovers, I think, resulted in points for Michigan. So Jim Knowles' defense, you can't even blame him for that. Their defense played outstanding. Like I said, this was a true Penn State-like performance from Ohio State. And that's a fireable offense. They have to move on from Ryan Day. I will make an entire video talking about this game and his future specifically, but brother, the last 4 years, they have not made a Big Ten championship game. Ohio State. They have not won a Big Ten championship game. They have not made a national title appearance in the last 4 years. Ohio State. Just think about all the first-round picks they've had from that team. 0 national title appearances, 0 national title wins, 0 Big Ten title wins, 0 Big Ten title appearances, 0 wins over Michigan. You got to get fired. You can't win big games. It's that simple. They will make the playoffs this year. They will probably be a road team that has to travel somewhere like Notre Dame, like Georgia, they better hope and pray. They better pray to God that they get to go on the road to Penn State for a playoff game. That is the only playoff game that Ohio State could win is on the road at Penn State. If it's not that, pack your bags, Ohio State. Ryan Day, you're fired. Chip Kelly, you're fired. It's over with. Number 6, I have Tennessee. They beat Vanderbilt. And here's the thing about this game: Vanderbilt returned the opening kick for a touchdown, got a takeaway, I think, right after that, scored a field goal, and went up 10-0 in like 5 minutes. I really thought they were gonna win this game. And then Tennessee scores a touchdown, but then Vanderbilt returns fire, and it's 17-7. So we're talking about the second quarter, I believe. It was 17-7 Vanderbilt, and it was in, Vanderbilt. So I was watching this game mesmerized, but then all of a sudden, Vanderbilt completely stalled out, and Tennessee's offense was on fire. Nico had, I think, his best game ever against a Power Four team, not including like Iowa last year in the bowl game. That doesn't count. So yeah, Nico was probably his best game ever against a Power Four opponent. Vanderbilt could not stop the run game of Tennessee. Hardly anybody has been able to. Dylan Sampson had a great game, and then Dante Thornton. I was waiting for them. This is their big transfer, deep threat receiver they got from Oregon. I was waiting for them to let him loose. He had two massive touchdowns this game, deep downfield. So Tennessee got it. And here's the thing: if Tennessee was any sort of fraudulent, I think they lose this game. Just the pressure of going down 10-0 and then 17-7 on the road. They showed a lot of composure. I respect. They showed a lot of composure, a lot of character this game, I think. So that means a lot to me. They're my number 6 team in the country now. They go 10-2. They are guaranteed a playoff spot. The question is it home? Is it on the road? That depends on if they're ranked ahead of Ohio State, ahead of Indiana, behind. I don't know. But it just depends on the matchup. They absolutely could win, and I think they could win their opening playoff game, but it depends on who they play. Number 7, I have SMU. SMU, man. I was high on SMU in the offseason. And, they were great last year in the AAC. I predicted that they could win 10 plus games in the ACC, but they started off poorly. If you remember, they played a bad game against Nevada early in the year, and then they lost to BYU, a game they absolutely should have won. BYU played terrible in that game and still managed to win. And I wrote them off. I dropped SMU out of my top 30 after that BYU because it was just a bad performance. And then they went on what I think a 10-game win streak, dominating the ACC teams they played. These last 2 weeks, I think they've won by like a combined score of like 75-12 or something. It's ridiculous. They're dominating the ACC. Rashard Smith, the running back, has been one of, if not the best backs in the entire ACC, maybe behind Amarion Hampton. Kevin Jennings, they benched Preston Stone, the guy who I thought was just, the guy. I thought he was the answer this year, but they benched him for this or I guess sophomore, Kevin Jennings, and he's played outstanding. Really, he has. I mean, they have not had RJ Maryland these last 2 weeks, which is very concerning to me. He's one of the best tight ends in the whole country. And if they don't have him moving forward, I think that does hinder their chances of, winning the ACC championship game, winning a playoff game. But we'll not think about that for now. The defense played outstanding. They had the last 2 weeks, but 17 penalties. 17 penalties in this game against Cal. That is staggering. That is a ridiculous number. They have to fix that if they want to beat Clemson. Okay. Listen. And by the way, SMU might be the second best team Clemson played overall this season because the three best this is why I think SMU is going to beat Clemson. The three best teams that Clemson has played, Georgia, Louisville, South Carolina. They've lost all those games, and their offense has struggled in all of those games. SMU is a good defense. SMU is a great offense, okay? And honestly, we're going to get to it when I talk about Clemson. I think that loss to South Carolina was just a deal breaker. Same for Ohio State. When we talk about Ohio State in the playoffs potentially, I think this is just a soul crusher. That's why I really do think anybody besides Penn State is going to, beat Ohio State in the first round. I really do believe that. So I think Clemson suffered that same soul crushing loss, and I think SMU honestly is going to walk all over Clemson. I have it as a blowout. SMU makes the playoff as a top 4 team, gets their first round bye. An amazing A+ season. Regardless of what happens from this point on, Clemson gets an A+ from me on this season. Just spectacular. That head coach, by the way, they better work really hard to keep him. And I think they will be able to because you look around the country, some of the jobs he could get from these other schools. I mean, SMU, they're going to be a first round bye playoff team with a returning quarterback. So I don't know how much better. I mean, unless someone offers him ridiculous amount of money and he brings the. Imagine this. What's that? Ohio State fires Ryan Day, brings in Rhett Lashley, and he brings in Kevin Jennings, the quarterback. That's an interesting thing to talk about, but I doubt it, honestly. I'll make a whole video talking about Ohio State later. Ole Miss at number 8 for me. Or yeah, they should not make the playoff. Don't get me wrong, but they're 9-3. They beat Mississippi State. I already talked about this. Did I already talk about this game? I forgot what I haven't talked about. They beat Mississippi State. This is on thanks or no, this is on Friday, I think, right? Yeah, the only Thanksgiving game was Tulane and Memphis. Ole Miss beat Mississippi State. Jackson Dart had whatever game. They ran the ball well for once. Obviously, the defense is going to come through. It's been the shining star of Ole Miss all season. 3 sacks, 3 takeaways, 39 rushing yards allowed. They win their rivalry game. I guess they don't completely fold and give up on the season, which is, I mean, I guess that's good to see. Um, I don't know, man. One of the most disappointing teams in the country. They've lost all of their games by one score. Yeah. I still think they beat most teams, like most playoff teams, honestly. You put Ole Miss against Ohio State in a neutral site right now. I think Ole Miss probably wins that, to be honest, but just so disappointing, man. What could have been? I'll make a whole video talking about the most disappointing teams. Ole Miss, you better believe, will be in there. Alabama at number 9 for me. They beat Auburn. They bounced back from their loss to Oklahoma. Jalen Milrow had a really good game. They ran the ball effectively, specifically with Jalen Milrow. Jeremy Bernard, what do you know? They have a receiver who can catch for over 100 yards. Shocker. The defense played well. It's Auburn. They let Peyton Thorne throw for 300 yards, which is a massive red flag. But yet again, man, 4 turnovers for Alabama. Turnovers continue to be a massive problem for this team. And listen, I think they are going to end up making the playoffs, which is just disgusting. There's no way that Alabama should make them. No team. This is why the playoffs. I hate the playoffs right now. The playoff structure. A 3-loss team should never make the playoffs. I don't care. I don't care what the situation is. A 3-loss team in the playoffs is just disgraceful. So yeah, I hate that, but they will make the playoffs. Hopefully they lose in the first round, but I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Miami, I have at number 10. I could have dropped them a lot farther, but I really did stop and think about it, because they lost to Syracuse this week. Soul crushing, gut wrenching disaster. And it was not because Cam Ward had a massive boneheaded turnover. It was simply because this is one of the worst defenses I've ever seen. Miami went up 21 to nothing in this game. They had 2 receivers over 120 yards. They ran the ball effectively. Cam Ward had a great game. It did not matter. They scored 38 points on the road and lost. The defense, 479 yards allowed. And they fooled me too. Coming off their best defensive game against Wake Forest, I thought they fixed it. I thought they changed things around. I was fooled. I was lied to. Miami is still as fraudulent as they've ever been. And my prediction, I had them going 12-0. I had them going 12-0, 13-0, winning the ACC. And I was wrong, man. Miami, they betrayed me. They let me down. It honestly hurts. It really does hurt. I wanted to see Cam Ward in the playoffs so bad, but alas, we'll never get to see that. So Miami drops number 10 for me. Number 11 drops it to Indiana. Now, I will say this. Indiana is the first team ever to beat a team 66 to nothing and then drop in the Raad poll. Okay, listen, they'll make the playoffs. There's no question about that. But for me, Ohio State losing to Michigan is an indictment on Indiana. Okay, but listen, the flip side could be, well, they beat Michigan and Ohio State could. I understand that, but listen, man, Indiana, they don't have a ranked win. Okay, their only game they played against Ohio State, they got blown out. It's just this is it. It doesn't really matter how well they've looked this season, right? If Indiana played Alabama in a playoff game tomorrow, and the government came in and said, you have to bet your life savings on a team. You're not betting on Indiana. Just keep it on. Just be honest. You're not betting on Indiana. If you were forced to bet your life savings on Indiana versus Alabama, on Indiana versus Ole Miss, you're not betting on Indiana. And if you are, well, I mean, good luck to you. But I just maybe they do win a playoff game. Maybe it happens. Maybe they get matched up with a good team, whatever. But I don't see it happening. I think they had a great season, an A+ season, regardless of what happens. But I cannot put them any higher than number 11 for me. I simply think they'd lose. And listen, them versus Miami would be a great game, I think. They could absolutely score 40 points on Miami. Anybody could. But I think Miami's offense is just too much, too like just way better. Even though Curtis Ward, great game, they ran the ball effectively. Elijah Surratt, he could start anywhere in the country, but yeah, just they beat Purdue, man. Come on, it's Purdue. They're the worst Power Four team in the country besides Florida State. Like, come on, man. Number 12, I have South Carolina. They went on the road in a very impressive win over Clemson in rivalry week to cement their best season in who knows how long. They moved to number 12 for me. Here's the thing, man. Lenoris Sellers. That stat line might not be the most impressive you've ever seen. I mean, it's the worst on this set of slides right here, but brother, this man had 4 or 5 plays with his legs that just dropped my jaw to the floor. That Clemson had him absolutely dead to rights, wrapped up in the backfield for a sack. And he not only managed to escape the sack, but use his legs to run for 20, 30, 40 yards, touchdowns. It was it was crazy. I'd never seen anything like it in my entire life. Lenoris Sellers was an absolute beast in this game. They ran for over 250 yards this game. Lenoris Sellers had a career high in terms of rushing yards. And like I said, 0 players over 60 yards. This was all on the back of Lenoris Sellers right here. Defensively, 1 sack, 2 takeaways. They held Clemson at home to 14 points. That's a really good. That's really good for South Carolina and their defense. They had an amazing season. They will not make the college football playoffs, unfortunately, but they still have a chance to win 10 games in a bowl game. I don't know who I'd like to see them play. The bowl matchups where it's like this bowl is an SEC versus a Big 12 team. This bowl, I don't know who I'd like to see them play. Colorado would be pretty interesting. That's off the top of my head. A team like Colorado, two of the most exciting, interesting teams in the country. That wouldn't intrigue me. But yeah, South Carolina, their season's over, but they get an A+ from me. Absolutely outstanding. Next up, I have Penn State at 13. Listen, man, you don't get any points for beating Maryland. I'm sorry, you beat Maryland. Who cares? The bottom of the Big Ten is like the worst in the country. Honestly, Maryland, Michigan State, UCLA, Purdue. Like, come on, you don't get any credit for beating these teams. Drew Aller with the most Drew Aller stat line I've ever seen in my life. 219 rushing yards. We know they run the ball well against these bad teams. Can't do it in the big games. Nick Singleton and Tyler Warren, they both had great games collectively. Tyler Warren, the best player on this team by a mile. Defensively, 6 sacks, 3 takeaways. We know they have a great defense. That translates regardless. It's Penn State, man. I simply don't care. Until Penn State wins a big game, they will perennially be outside my top 10. That's just how it's going to work. Number 14, I have Colorado. They beat Oklahoma State 52-0. Oklahoma State, winless in their conference. They have a really strong argument. It's so sad, though. The worst team in the Big 12, winless in the Big 12, Oklahoma State, beat Arkansas this year. Embarrassing. Absolutely shameful performance by Arkansas in that game. But alas, Oklahoma State finishes like 3-9, I think. Colorado beat the brakes off them. Shadur Sanders, 438 yards high. I do not like. Listen, Colorado was playing their guys way too late. Honestly, Shadur, Travis Hunter, all those guys should have been pulled like in the middle of the third quarter. There was no need for them to continue to play as long as they did. It was blatant stat padding. It is what it is. Do it. I mean, but I don't like that. Even just like to prevent injury and stuff like that. I did not like that at all. LeJounte Western, Travis Hunter combined for 21 catches, 291 yards, 5 touchdowns, and Travis Hunter did have an interception. I don't know who's going to win the Heisman. I'm leaning towards Travis Hunter. I want Gene T. I want it to be a co-Heisman. I really want them. They both deserve it, brother. But I'm leaning ever so slightly to Travis Hunter. Defensively, 3 sacks, 4 takeaways, 147 yards allowed. The Colorado defense, they've had more amazing performances than they've had bad performances this season. Let that sink in. They've had more amazing performances than bad performances. That says a lot in 2 years how far they switched that shit around. Clemson at 15 for me. But let me talking Colorado a little bit more actually. Their bowl game. I hope Shadur and Travis Hunter play in their bowl game because them potentially winning 10 games against another good team would be absolute cinema. Their bowl game will be the most watched bowl game. That's why I hope whoever puts them together, they do a terrible job. But I hope they take the Colorado bowl game seriously and put them against another top 20 team for an like pick whatever top honest okay pick whatever top 25 9-win team you want. Put them against Colorado for a chance to win 10 games. That is absolute cinema. Even if it's just a team like Illinois, okay? I'd prefer a team like South Carolina or Ole Miss or Miami. Oh my God, imagine Miami versus Colorado in a bowl game. That'd be absolute cinema. But whatever team you want, please take Colorado's bowl game seriously so that Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter play. That would be absolutely incredible. Clemson at 15. They lost South Carolina at home. Cade Klubnik, he had a good game, but they failed to get in the red zone and in the end zone, I should say, when it mattered. They ran the ball well defensively, 3 sacks, 3 takeaways. And man, it was so close. Their defense really did an amazing job, but they just could not bring down Lenora Sellers when it mattered the most. 4 players over 65 yards. It's really a weird thing because you outgain South Carolina, I think, in terms of yards and everything. They turn it out. You win the turnover battle, I think, against South Carolina, but you still lose at home. It's a weird thing. It's just Clemson is not a great team anymore. They're just not. They lose games where they should win. Um, they're they lost 2 games. Remember when Clemson used to have like the biggest winning streak at home? They lost 2 games this season. They lost last season. They just don't have a home field advantage anymore. It's just they haven't lost on the road. They lost a neutral site game to Georgia. They lost 2 games at home. So I guess Clemson fans could say, if we play you in your building, you don't stand a chance. So I mean, listen, Clemson, very disappointing season. They go 9-3. They're still at 15 for me because it's weird. Their offense does not perform well against good teams. So maybe I should drop them even further. But it's just a weird thing. When Clemson plays well, they dominate these bad ACC teams, but they have not played good against a good team yet. So it's weird. I got Clemson at 15 though. Arizona State, I got at 16. They dominated Arizona this year. Sam Levitt, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. They ran the ball extremely well, mainly in part to Cam Skattebo, the best running back in the Big 12, bar none. There's a lot of good ones out there. Taj Brooks, DJ Giddens. Um, okay, so I'm not going to keep running through all of them, but they got a lot. RJ Harvey, they got a lot of good running backs in the Big 12. Cam Skattebo's the best. Also, guys like Jordan Tyson had big games here. They got another guy who had a really massive game. A bunch of guys showed out for Arizona State this game. They win 10 games for the first time in who knows how long. Defensively, shut down Arizona. They bump up 2 spots for me. I do think they're going to win the Big 12 championship against Iowa State. So they'll get a home playoff game. I don't like that, honestly. I think it should just be the 12 highest ranked teams. I don't like the automatic bids. I don't the first round bye should go to the 4 highest ranked teams. It should not be conference champions. I think a conference champion it should be an automatic bid, I guess. I think listen, the the top 4 ranked conference champions. So if there's a case where it's an outstandingly good Mountain West team, against a bad ACC or Big 12 champ, they'll get in over them. I think the 4 highest conference champs should get automatic bids, but the first round bye goes to just whoever the 4 highest ranked teams are. So I don't like that Arizona State, for example, would get a first round bye. I don't think they deserve it, but that's what it is. They're ranked 16 for me. Number 17, I got Boise State. They finally beat a team by more than 1 score. So as a result, like I said, they move up in my rankings. So they beat Oregon State by 16 points. Maddox Madsen did not turn the ball over. He had his best game in a while. Obviously, we know the Boise State story. Ashton Jeanty, amazing game. Defense played better than they have recently. 2 games in a row, actually. I think the defense has played really good. So can Boise State win a playoff game? Before we even say that, let's hope they win the Mountain West Championship game against UNLV because that was a close game when they played in the regular season. So let's not pretend like it's a given that they're going to even make the college football playoff. Let's hold our horses here. You get the joke because Boise State, what Broncos, whatever. So let's wait and see if they win the Mountain West Championship, and then we'll talk about their chances in the playoffs against whoever. Number 18, I got Memphis. They played way earlier in the week. They played like a week ago when I'm making the video. I think I already talked about the game, didn't I? They beat Tulane. Yeah, I talked about the Memphis Tulane game in my last rankings that I made. So they dropped 1 spot because they haven't played in like a week. So they unfortunately missed the AAC championship game. So they don't have a chance to win that. But 10-win season, first time, and I think they're the school history. So they've won back-to-back 10-win seasons. So shout out to them. Hopefully they get a good, respectable bowl game and they get a chance to show out in that. Number 19, I have no, I stopped it at 18 because that was really it. I didn't think anybody below here deserved any more recognition. Army Tulane would be my next two teams. The winner of that AAC championship game, I'll talk about them because if it's Tulane, they win 10 games. If it's Army, they go 11-1. Great season for them. Could potentially beat Navy. That could be if Army wins the AAC championship game against Tulane and then beats Navy, they'd be 12-1, and that would be like their best season in like fucking a century. So I'll talk about that if that happens. But these are my top 18 teams here going into conference championship weekend. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I will see y'all on the next one. Peace.